Hello there friends, welcome back to another episode of Generation Tech. My name is Alan. So a while back, a lot of channels were theorizing that the Inquisitor character Marrock from the Ahsoka series was Galen Marrock, aka Starkiller. If you actually played Force Unleashed and knew who Starkiller was and what the Inquisitors are from this era, then you probably didn't fall for the trap, because Starkiller is not a scrub. He was at the level of a Sith Lord when it came to Force powers, and not just one of these rent-a-cop Inquisitors like Marrock, who turns into some old stanky green dust when he gets defeated. It's like he's blowing smoke up our ass. For those of you who don't know, Starkiller was the beloved playable characters from the Star Wars Unleashed series. These two games are honestly ahead of their time and probably a bit too ambitious and promised a little too much and needed to wait for a more robust and modern physics engine to be invented. But yeah, if you guys enjoyed Jedi Fallen Order or Jedi Survivor and don't mind going back a few console generations, I recommend you checking out this game. It's not my cup of tea, I'm more of a KOTOR kind of guy, but Unleashed is really the spiritual predecessor of the Jedi series as far as gameplay style goes, and there's definitely a die-hard following. And part of the reason why this was because Starkiller was a really interesting character. Now, before Disney took control over the Star Wars IP with its iron fist, there was a lot less central control over what creators could do with characters. And let's just say in the Unleashed games, you had the option to completely change the outcome of the original trilogy. This is a really cool element that made these games feel more important, but at the same time, for purist fans, it basically gave them heart attacks. And so Marrock clearly was not Starkiller, but why are we focused on him in this video? Well, you see, he wasn't the first Inquisitor to die in this strange way. You guys remember that Inquisitor who challenges Ahsoka in Tales of the Jedi? Well, he dies in a very similar way as well. Sure, he's all tough and scary in front of all the normies.
A Jedi was here, and yet I find no one.
But against Ahsoka, he doesn't even stand a chance. Actually, this Inquisitor is even more useless than Marrock. Ahsoka just grabs his circle blade like he's a child, rips it from him, and then cuts him in two. And he deflates, as if he were full of hot air. While we don't see green dust or anything when this Inquisitor dies, it might have just been because we didn't have the right angle. Now, a lot of viewers have pointed out the similarities between these two Inquisitors that go beyond just their over-the-top blades and mediocre lightsaber abilities and strange deaths, and has a lot to do with how they sound. Take a look at these two clips.
You're supposed to be dead. Nothing.
Both of their voices are heavily modulated, as if they were speaking into some kind of voice recorder, or perhaps they're just, I don't know, tortured undead spirits with connectivity issues. So what exactly is happening here? What makes these two Inquisitors so different from the other ones we've seen so far? Well, I have two theories. Okay, my first theory has to do not with the Inquisitors, but with Ahsoka herself. We've covered who she is and what makes her different from other Force users in many of our previous videos. But the point is, Ahsoka is a special character. She's been chosen by the Force to do the bidding of the living Force. She was supposed to die as a child when a giant saber-toothed tiger snatched her away from her mother, but I believe the Force intervened. Then, during the Clone Wars, when the celestial being known as the Sun killed her, she literally was brought back to life after another celestial known as the Daughter transferred her life energy into her. Ahsoka had been cold. The decaying process had started, the brain was starved of oxygen, but the Daughter, who was the embodiment of the light side, brought light and growth wherever she went, had jump-started Ahsoka's system and made her alive once again. I believe after this incident that Ahsoka carried the life force and energy of the Daughter everywhere she went. And the Daughter's little force creature named Marrock also followed Ahsoka as if to symbolize this. It became even more apparent that something was watching over Ahsoka when she fought Darth Vader at the Sith Temple on Malachor. Before Vader could strike her down, she was saved once again, this time by Ezra Bridger from a portal in the world between worlds. The Force works in mysterious ways, and Ahsoka, for some reason, is very well tuned into the light side of the Force. It's almost working on her behalf. And it's no coincidence that while in hiding, Ahsoka uses the name Ashla, which was the ancient name for the goddess of the light side, a not-so-hidden connection to the being known as the Daughter. And once again in the Ahsoka series, it seems like because of this connection, she just can't die, even after she falls off a cliff and ends up underwater for, I guess, several hours? This means that Ahsoka is different and that she can manipulate the Force in different ways, or perhaps she just has a better connection to the Force now. And this will also affect other things around her, like her lightsaber. See, lightsaber combat isn't just sword fighting. Let's let Kanan Jarrus explain.
Energy constantly flows through the crystal. You're not fighting with a simple blade as much as you are directing a current of power. Your thoughts, your actions, they become energy. They flow through the crystal as well and become a part of the blade.
And so if you think about lightsaber combat in this way, it's not just a physical sword, it's more like an emitter that's spewing out force energy that is heavily affected by the wielder of the blade. And depending on the mindset of the individual and what side of the force they're oriented to, this could also change the composition of the energy as well. There are actually certain forms of Sith lightsaber combat that pours pure hatred and anger into the blade. It's pretty intense. And so my theory is that when Ahsoka's pure light side energy gets channeled through this kyber crystal, through the blade, and it touches dark side force users, it just makes them simply disappear. It evaporates them immediately and dissolves them at the molecular level. Why did I come up with this idea? Well, we've seen other Inquisitors die before, and typically they don't just dissolve like that. It's only the 2 Inquisitors that Ahsoka's killed recently that have just deflated. She fought other Inquisitors like the 5th brother and 7th sister during the Rebel series, but she didn't kill them. And then in the novel, Ahsoka does kill the 6th brother by overloading his kyber crystal. He dies from an explosion and his body doesn't disappear, and that's probably because he wasn't actually cut by Ahsoka's blade. And it's actually his kyber crystals that Ahsoka purifies and then places into her new lightsabers with the 2 white blades. The second theory is different and it has a lot more to do with witchcraft. You see, the name Morgan is synonymous with witches. In The Witcher, you have Morgana. And if you go back even further, you have Morgan Le Fay from the Tales of Arthur. You see, Morgan Le Fay, like most women back in the day who could read and, were kind of independent, was determined to be a witch. And her confidant, another very independent woman known as Irma, would cast a spell on one of Arthur's knights named Sir Marrock and turn him into a werewolf. George Lucas always loved including mythology in Star Wars, and Filoni is just carrying on that trend. Filoni also loves wolves. He created the Loth Wolves for Kanan Jarrus, he created the Wolfpack clone unit, and even his character in The Mandalorian is called Trapper Wolf. And now Marrock is a werewolf, and Shin Hati and Balin Skull share the last name of 2 wolves from Norse mythology as well. You could say that Morgan Elsbeth is in control of her own pack of wolves. Now, Morgan Elsbeth isn't just any witch, she's a witch from Dathomir, otherwise known as a Nightsister. It's not a race, but more like a covenant, a group of sisters who ruled a matriarchal society together on the planet of Dathomir, one of the original Force Nexus planets in the galaxy. That just means there's a really high concentration and density of Force energy on this planet. What makes Dathomir so unique is this greenish magical ichor that can be found in substantial quantities all over the planet. The Nightsisters learn how to wield and shape this ichor and use it to power themselves. You see, most Nightsisters are not very force sensitive. They're probably at Sabine's level if you really want to gauge them. Asajj Ventress was perhaps one of the strongest Dathomiri witches, and Darth Maul was probably one of the strongest Night Brothers. But both were like a once-in-a-generation talent. But it didn't really matter too much. The Nightsisters didn't have to be very force sensitive. They just needed to know a series of incantations or magical spells that allowed them to tap into the ichor's power. Now, we don't have that much information about how the magical ichor works, but there seems to be a few rules in place. It seems like the magical ichor, the further it goes away from home, the weaker it gets. The magical ichor itself is visible and seems to look like a greenish cloud. We can see this green energy very clearly when Mother Talzin replaces Maul's legs with some magical ichor, or when Talzin made Maul's brother Savage Opress much larger and more powerful. She used this magical ichor to fortify him. This magical ichor reminds me a lot of Sith alchemy, an ancient lost school of force practice that only recently has been rediscovered by Darth Sidious. And while this magical ichor doesn't seem to work very well off-planet, very powerful individuals like Mother Talzin or one of the other Elder Witches have special abilities that allow them to bind this magical ichor onto other beings, like Savage, for instance. It was only after Palpatine killed Savage that we would see this magical ichor dissipate from his body.
Brother, I am an unworthy apprentice.
That's what I look like after I pass out from Korean barbecue. No, but seriously, that green cloud, right? It looks familiar. It looks exactly like the stuff that comes out of Marrock. Only difference is Savage Opress's body does not disappear after his death. Now, as I mentioned before, we're not 100% sure how this magical ichor works. Like the Force, it has a lot of different uses depending on how people are manipulating it. For instance, the Nightsisters of Dathomir have this very intricate burial technique where they put their deceased in these ponds and hang them from trees. It's not just for decoration. You see, all you have to do is say the chant of resurrection, and all of these buried Nightsisters will come back to life as zombies and fight for the planet. This is actually really smart and eliminates one of the biggest problems with zombie uprisings, and that's the fact that it's really hard to punch your way through a wooden casket and then dig yourself out of 6 feet of dirt. This method clearly works a lot better, and it's absolutely terrifying. And the Nightsisters would use this undead army to try and fight off the Separatist droid army, which unfortunately didn't work very well. Also, the body of these zombies didn't disappear after they were defeated. Now, it seems like when Dave Filoni brings elements from his animated series to live action, he does tend to change them a little bit, kind of like the World Between Worlds. He fundamentally changes how these elements work to better suit the live action audience. And so what I think we're dealing with here when Marrock dies is a whole another level of Nightsister magic. Morgan Elsbeth is clearly very knowledgeable about ancient Nightsister magic. She was able to use that knowledge to open up a pathway to the next galaxy. And given that whole relationship between Morgan Le Fay and the werewolf Sir Marrock, I think what's happening here is that Morgan Elsbeth is using some old tortured spirits captured by her in one way or another and using them to possess these suits of armor, making Marrock a phantom warrior of sorts. Remember, the Nightsisters at the end of the Clone Wars were decimated by General Grievous and his droid army. Morgan Elsbeth was furious about what happened. This is why she aligns herself with the Empire. Although I'm pretty sure she doesn't realize that Palpatine was behind the destruction of her people as well. But what is clear is she's clearly devoted to the Empire, and you kind of have to be if you're still fighting for it when everyone else has left. Fighting Thrawn in another galaxy with no help is a real long shot. And so I'm assuming that Morgan Elsbeth wasn't coerced into helping the Empire. She fully wanted to help them, not only by producing ships and weapons, but she probably also lended her knowledge of Nightsister magic to the Empire and their various weapons programs. And I think they could have used a lot of help with their Inquisitor program, especially after the first batch of Inquisitors proved to be kind of useless and were all wiped out relatively quickly. And I'm guessing because the Empire killed all of the Jedi, they now needed a replacement program, which is where Morgan Elsbeth and her Nightsister zombie technology comes in handy. I think time will tell just how important this Nightsister magic will be to the Ahsoka series. I think it definitely gives a different vibe from the usual Force energy magic we usually see. What's even more interesting is how Morgan Elsbeth's skills will be used by Thrawn. Knowing Thrawn, he was never above using the Force or magic to his advantage. Whether it was the Yuslamar he used to neutralize Force users, or the cloned Force users he tried to turn into weapons. Thrawn has always been very open-minded to using unorthodox tools and methods. He's not very idealistic or dogmatic in his approach to warfare, which is what makes him unpredictable and dangerous. And when he was blasted out into another galaxy by a bunch of space whales, he only had a few Star Destroyers with him. And so at most, he had maybe a legion of stormtroopers. It's hardly enough manpower to really take back the entire galaxy. Even the New Republic in its weakened state should be able to overwhelm such a small army, even if it's being led by someone as skilled as Thrawn. And so maybe Thrawn's kind of open to Morgan Elsbeth using her Nightsister magic to, I don't know, create another zombie army for him, because at this point he doesn't have any other choice. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments section down below. Also, don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification button so you don't miss out on the rest of our awesome content. As usual, my name is Alan, reminding you that my allegiance is to the Republic, to democracy,